The panel, you got your program, so in the interest of time, I would need another hour to begin to introduce the panelists in their extensive bios. But to my right, as you know, there's Russell Simmons, who was our keynote speaker last night. And to my immediate left is Nina Vaca, Salah Boukadoum, Gail Warrior, and Trey Bowles. Let's jump right in. Russell, thanks for joining us for the Dallas Festival of Ideas. I was fascinated about some of the things you had to say last night, but I want to pick up on where you left off last night, talking about the notion of entrepreneurs having both faith and resilience. You talked about personal growth and resilience as being key to creating an entrepreneurial spirit. And you said, quote, if you don't have faith in yourself, you can't move forward. Can you expound on that a bit?
Well, I was saying that people are so concerned about results that they forget that they only have control over the work. You only have control over the work, and the results come as they come. And if you are awake and alive, present doing your work, then the results come quicker if they come. The fact is, you can never fail until you quit, so you have to forget results. They don't even make you happy, because a new result creates a new desire. So the idea that as soon as I get here, I'll be here, you will always be here. So operate from a present, abundant kind of mindset, and then you will attract more. So the neediness is a cause of separation from your goal. Needing nothing attracts everything. So you have to go to work with your head down and be faithful, not in the future, but in the present. So this attracts success. You know, it's written in all these prosperity books, but it's also written in all the scriptures. This idea of giving without expectation is the most attractive. And if you can give while present, then good givers are great getters anyway. When you are worried about result, or when you have to, even the faith idea that something's going to happen as opposed to faith in the present moment and happiness, you give away your focus. So try to promote a present mindset. Do whatever it can. You have to, to promote that kind of a stillness, to operate from that state of abundance. All of you in life, you can't get more in a comfortable seat. They ain't gonna give you shit else, nothing else. So, no matter how rich you are, you can operate from one seat only. And this attracts, especially as you are present and awake, it attracts success.
Now, how does this idea and this concept correlate with your philanthropy? One thing I've noticed is that entrepreneurs increasingly are demonstrating a social conscience. They're finding causes to get involved with. How does that jibe with what you just talked about in terms of embodying that faith in your businesses?
Well, the challenges that you have in front of you, again, being present always brings out a lighter heart and a connection to everybody and everything around you. This idea that you're connected and that we're one living, breathing entity and that we are here to serve each other becomes more and more present in you as you become more and more present in the world, because then you're awake and you realize the truth, that you are connected and that these other elements are you, people, animals, you're connected to them. And so what you give to them is like giving to yourself, and the more you can open your heart, the more you recognize this connection.
Gail, I want to turn to you real quickly. I will come back to you, but you, in your workplace, you speak to that a whole lot. In fact, you kind of shifting your business model. You started in the construction industry, and now you're kind of moving toward sort of lifestyle businesses. Can you speak to that too, about how you begin to embody that idea of faith and resilience?
Sure. So to me, it's all about the energy that we put into our work. And Russell is correct that everything is actually connected. And so if you wake up and you have negative energy when you start out your day, then everything around you throughout that day is going to be negative. And so you have to have the right mindset about your work. And then particularly if you're working with other people, then the energy that you have, you're going to give off to other people. So if you truly want to be successful, then the energy that you have and the faith that you put into your work is going to truly determine the height and the level of your success, as well as being fully present in everything that you're doing. And I think Russell alluded to it as well yesterday in regards to fully present in how you think, what you read, what you see on TV or you choose not to see. It's all about choices and the energy that you decide to put into your work every day.
You mentioned another concept or idea I want to talk with you about. You said many of the businesses that you've built, you've had much success in different industries, that your guiding philosophy is to find the white space that no one else occupies and fill it. Talk with us about what that white space is. How do other entrepreneurs begin to find that white space and fill it?
Many people who are looking for what they call a white space see everything already being done, and then they join one idea or another as their entrepreneur, and their energy goes into one. My view is that most things aren't done. People need everything, and there are some things that they have, but they really need everything else. So you have to kind of be, as an innovator, or as an entrepreneurial innovator, if that's what you choose to be, you just look for what people need, and sometimes they have it, but they just don't have enough of it. Like I said yesterday, I'll just briefly expound on this. It is impossible for us to continue, and I'm going to say this, and I don't want people, because they don't digest it when I say it, even though it's food we're talking. 100 billion animals are the cause of your hurricane. They're the cause of the destruction of nutrients in the earth, and it's the cause of all of our natural resources. All of the water they say save goes into the animal product that poison the people. So there's all kinds of new businesses. I saw one that 15 separate billionaires, including Bill Gates, invested in, just trying to create cheaper, much cheaper, because you're not counting natural resources, cheaper, healthier food that tastes better than the animal product you're consuming, that will replace what you're used to. So instead of having all the antibiotics and the growth hormones, so there has to be new products invented or sold in order to change the world, or it won't be inhabitable. And then people, again, the pharmacists are doing well, and everybody's, the doctors and pharmacists have more work to do, but the truth is we're poisoning ourselves and the planet. So there's a whole world there. And there's more than one person has to do it. Hampton Creek is one great example, but then there's a few others, and there's a hole in the market. So that's just one example for me as a person who I see what the world needs, and that's one I'm investing in those companies too. I'm not one of the billionaires, but I'm a small investor. But I think find things they need and invest in them and build those things.
Not to belabor the point, but is that the same as I'm sure the audience is familiar with the terms like finding a niche market or kind of finding your lane. Is that?
It's the same thing.
Same thing.
Niche. A niche is small. A big, broad idea that everyone needs is something else. I mean, so you're hopeful that what you see the world needing, you may see it, and it may seem niche to everyone else, but you say, damn, everybody needs this shit. Everybody. They need it or they're going to die. The planet's going to die. It's big. That's not niche. Right. So, and that's a good point. I want to bring the panel on that. I mean, Salah, you founded Impact City, which is an initiative aimed at transforming Dallas and into the center of the world for solving some of humanity's greatest problems. A noble idea. Picking up on what Russell just mentioned, what white space do you see here in our city that needs to be filled?
So I love this idea of the white space, and I think a lot of entrepreneurs sometimes approach their thinking in terms of solving a problem. They look for a problem to solve.
Same thing.
On the other side of that, sometimes there's an opportunity to be taken advantage of that isn't necessarily a problem. So for example, everybody has a mobile device today. The problem wasn't that nobody could walk around and talk on their phone. It wasn't a specific problem that was solved. It was a new thing that had never been done before. It was a new opportunity. So sometimes they look in terms of what can be accomplished instead of what needs to be accomplished. So for Dallas specifically, my vision for our city is that we would not become the next something or to solve the next version of a problem, but to actually become something that's never existed in the city before, and that is to solve world-scale humanitarian problems from our city as the central hub for the entire world. so that when a person wakes up in, say, Ohio and says, I want to solve issues of poverty, or I want to bring opportunity to women in Latin America, that they all automatically know, I want to go to Dallas. That's the place where this is happening. That's kind of a different... It's a different approach to problem solving. It's more looking at global opportunity, I'd say.
Well, I gotta say, it's a problem when you guys sit in the crib and use the phone instead of going to the beach. That's a problem. I just wanted to say that in case you...
Nina, you, certainly with your company, Information Technology Services, I mean, you started small and then you've grown into one of the, you're just out of this world large company and one of the most well-regarded business women in the country. You certainly have filled a white space. Tell us how you went about finding a white space early on in your career. I think there was a moment in time when you almost shut down and you found a different lane to get into and it sort of took off. Talk with us about that.
That's true, and I'll answer your question, but first I want to say what a pleasure to be here with all of you. One of the things I always think about is 70% of leadership is just showing up. So you should give yourself a big round of applause for being here. You talked about, by the way, Pinnacle is celebrating its 20-year anniversary this year. It only took us 20 years to become an overnight sensation. And like many of you, I went to lots of conferences, and I wanted to be inspired. And this is why I have so much respect for our panel and what we do today, because you can't be what you can't see. And so a lot of times I went to lots of panels, lots of conferences. I found the ecosystem that would inspire me, where I would help and find people that would help me build my business. I started my company in 1996. I was 25 years old. Don't do the math. Well, I just told you, it's 20 years. It was a great time in our country because the white space was technology. This is pre-Windows, this is just when Unix and the enterprise was starting. And so you could literally, it was a time in our country where technology, people just needed it, corporations needed it. And so you could, I was lucky enough to start the company then. We started as a service industry, and so we started making money the day we opened our doors. Not your classic entrepreneurial story. 4 years later, 9/11 hit. Companies like mine were devastated. Corporations were letting go of people. They weren't looking for people. We had a liquidation plan in place. I was right in front of my very eyes, was going out of business. I was down to 4 people. 3 of them were related to me because I'm Hispanic. I had to get the whole family involved, That's the great thing about the Hispanic family. You got lots of people, lots of resources. And we were about to go bankrupt. And I really believe in what Russell is saying. Your faith, not just in God, but your faith in yourself. Thank you. And so I really had to dig deep, dig hard, and say, do I believe in myself? Can I do this? And it wasn't for me, for then it was for those 4 people. And I'm proud to say that today, 20 years later, those 4 people turned into thousands of people across the United States, and the same values still exist.
Fantastic. I want to get you in a second, Trey, but Gail, I want to piggyback on what Nina's talking about, because your story is very similar. You're in business almost 20 years, and I'm sure...
And she's younger, that's not fair.
But I want to address the specific issue of being a female and being a minority. Were there extra challenges for you starting out almost 20 years ago and being an entrepreneur in a very difficult male-dominated profession, which is contracting construction?
Short answer is yes. So I started Warrior Construction in 1997. And we had a niche market. Construction wasn't a niche market, but what we were doing was a niche space where we were doing modular construction, primarily for the federal government. And so you can imagine being a African-American woman of color in an industry, construction is already a male-dominated industry, but then when you look at the modular building industry, it was, primarily all white male. And I think one of the reasons why I was able to be successful has a lot to do with, we've touched upon it today, is faith in myself. And that actually came from how I was raised. My dad always told me my last name is Warrior, and it's Warrior for a reason. And there's absolutely nothing, my parents both told me there's absolutely nothing that you can't do as long as you put determination and work towards reaching your goal. And so when I walked into a room, I never relied on the fact, or I was never concerned about the fact that I was minority or that I was female. I was there to do a job and to be successful at doing that job. There were times, even today, that it's difficult sometimes navigating through the waters, and we went through a time where we considered filing bankruptcy. I actually hired a consultant, was one of those turnaround guys that was going to come in and look at our balance sheet and look at our backlog and our projects and help us to determine how to turn the company around. We were literally robbing Peter to pay Paul, didn't know if I was going to make payroll sometimes. And after about 2 weeks, he came in, he said, I've got the solution for you, and I know how you can get out of this situation. I said, awesome, what is it? And he said, you need to file bankruptcy and just start over. And I looked at him and I said, that's not an option. And it wasn't an option for me because I knew what was inside of me, and I knew that I had an awesome team working with me at the time, and they had so much energy and so much power to be successful. And so sometimes as entrepreneurs, we have to make sure that we don't listen to the noise, the negative noise that's coming in, telling us of what we can't do. And we have to rely on what we have, within our heart and within our head, and be able to persevere and push forward, and that's what we did.
Russell, you mentioned that last night, that one of the key to your success was surrounding yourself with smart people. I think you said people that are smarter than you, so you can...
It better be, because... No, yeah, I did say that. So what she said of faith, and that moment where the business guys get in your head. You have an idea. That's my first experiences, but I mean, it happened in every business because they were all so foreign to my partners. They never really resonated. No one liked any idea they had that was any good, and it's always like, yeah. And once you go to work, you say, I'm going to do this. Everybody will say, great, right? And then a couple of years later, say, I didn't have the instant success ever. Never one time did anything work out the way I planned. So it always took longer than the plan. And always the partners would quit, or you have to buy them out, or you have to just have faith in yourself. And a couple of times I've been faced with bankruptcy. The rush card, nobody ever heard of it. Like, what is that? Like a virtual bank? And now I'm competing with American Express and Chase Manhattan and Walmart. But when we started that company, no one ever heard of a virtual bank. And there were 50 million people underserved. And it took 5 or 6 years before we made a nickel. And then, once we showed it was possible, then they became competitors, and they became good because we stole every idea the minute they came out with them. And as they stole ours, whether it was whatever, card-to-card transfer, we didn't invent, we just promoted that somebody else did it. But the point is, all of the ideas that made the company great came because they were competitors, but there were none and no believers. No one to make a TV show to follow the Osmonds with a Reverend and 5A students. It just was something that they hated. So I don't have any good experiences with the noise. The noise is always the people who don't believe. And I've never, if I started something in music, I'd probably have a little more support, or something in the space that I've already proven myself. But I never get to do that because I always have an idea that's outside of what I'm capable of doing anyway. So.
Now, how long did it take you to turn for the rush card to go from concept or idea? I can imagine kind of, maybe going through a yoga session and sort of thinking about maybe, this could be a good idea. I could kind of create this card. There's like 50 million people who don't have a bank account, so I'll do that. But how long did it take to turn that idea into an actual
No, I was actually
venture?
with a friend who's a partner in the company. He had a debt collection. He had millions, and he had a new business where he never called the people. He would just research them to find money that was owed to, for instance, American Express. He was the only person who bought their distressed debt. And he had this database. We thought we'd access his database, and then people who had locked out of the financial system could get back in through our card. And then we found out we couldn't access their database, so it kind of evolved to, we asked Visa, can we go out and ask people? They're like, we never heard of that, so we're gonna do it anyways. They said, okay, and we went out and we started to promote this idea. And imagine people, it's easy. You look at people standing online and they're waiting to cash their check. And then they have to stand online to pay my bill. Then they have to stand online for anything. They're locked out of the American dream. So it was pretty easy to say stored value. And no banker understood it. And it took us 5 years before we made a nickel and to really unlock its potential. But it was a constant struggle to explain, and even to get to people who were smarter than me, their brains were like, they were educated, so they didn't know shit. Which, so they were just bankers. They just didn't understand the simplest idea. But, we finally found people who were open enough to help us, people who could count, count. And then now there's hundreds of people there, obviously, and some of them are, smart. Until that crisis recently, I realized I had to take over again, so they weren't that smart.
And then quickly, how long did it take for that to become profitable? I mean, you were
5.5 years. Fat Farm, I said there's not one African American or one person who understood this whole industry that was buying all of the Ralph and Tommy and making it their own way and wearing it the way they wanted to wear it. It was black and white. It was kids doing their own thing. I said, why can't we make a clothing company like that? And it became a multi-billion-dollar business with all the people I put in it. I put Jay-Z in it, and Puffy got in it, and I put Nelly in. So they built a big industry. But it was a hole in the market. There were clothes that literally people would buy the wrong size. They would, find the only things that looked a certain way. And so there was a whole industry to be had. It took 5 years for that company. It took 5 years for a financial service company. It takes 5 or 6 years for almost everything. You know how long it took to get them to take Def Poetry Jam on a poetry show on HBO? It was the longest running show in the history of HBO. They did not like it.
By the way, I always dreamed of being on that show, and so it's unfortunate I never had that opportunity, but great show. I want to turn to Trey Bowles, who's doing some of the most, I think, some very important work in our city right now. He's called a serial entrepreneur. He's had his hands in lots of ventures, a social capitalist. But you co-founded the Dallas Entrepreneur Center, and it's a location for entrepreneurs to learn how to start, build, and grow businesses. Tell us what you're seeing right now on the ground floor when it comes to startups and businesses, and what vacuum there is, or what white space you're seeing that these companies are trying to fill.
Well, I had a hypothesis about 3 years ago, and I believed that Dallas-Fort Worth was the top 5 or 6 entrepreneurial community in the country. I also had a hypothesis that nobody outside of Dallas knew that or cared. And so, but I knew that the entrepreneurs and innovators in North Texas is what built North Texas. It is what made us who we are. It's in the very fabric of who we are. And so I just wanted to bring them together and begin to aggregate them. And so we started to help with lots of other groups build a community. And as we started to build that community and pull people together, things start to happen. These sort of organic collisions begin to happen. And now we're a couple years in. We've had 45,000 people through our space. There's 17 accelerators in Dallas. Yeah, thanks. I mean, this is the stuff you guys are doing. There's 25 co-working spaces, there's funding that's happening for businesses, there's all sorts of things going, and what it is so many people view entrepreneurship as though you're standing on this cliff looking off into this abyss, and you think, I can't do that, I can't jump into this, I can't take that step off this cliff. But what's been built in North Texas is that as we walk up to the edge of that cliff and we look over, there's thousands of people down there below in that abyss saying, go ahead and jump, we got you. We're gonna help you, we're gonna support you. And so, what areas, what white spaces are they looking into? I think you gotta look at some of the industries that exist here, but I think Dallas is such an interesting city because not only do we have the second most Fortune 500 companies in the country. We have 19,000 new businesses that start every year just in the city of Dallas. That doesn't count all of North Texas. There's a great opportunity to take these corporations, or customers, as I like to call them, and build products and solutions that fit that. But we also have, and Rush, you may not know this, a burgeoning fashion tech market here. It's absolutely incredible the things that's going on in fashion tech, in fintech, financial technology. We've got amazing stuff going on in oil and gas technology. We've got artists and creative people. We have people that work with their hands. There's really no limit to what kinds of things people are doing here. There's a really cool education piece. There's an impact city piece, a social enterprise and innovation piece. I mean, I think the thing I like most about that I'm seeing here is we're becoming the I city, right? We're the idea city, we're the impact city, we're the innovation city. I mean, we can just keep going and keep going and keep going. It's because people here do two things. When you sit across the table from somebody and you tell them you have an idea, you think you want to go explore it, a white space you want to enter, the first response you get here is, you should do that. Not, here's the 25 reasons why that won't work, or you're going to run out of your 401k, or that's stupid. It's, you should do it. And the second thing that is said is, how can I help you? And we truly want to help people. And I think that's a differentiating factor here for us versus other cities and places across the country.
Mark Cuban, one of our best-known entrepreneurs in the city, called North Texas one of the best places for entrepreneurs to start. But he said, he was addressing a business luncheon back in September, and he said, it's not necessarily about finding more capital, adding different services. My businesses require brain power and effort, and there's no shortage of that here. But piggybacking on that, Russell, before you got here, you and I had a brief chat on the phone a couple weeks ago. I'm sure you've forgotten by now, but one of the things I was struck by that you said was that education is key. You emphasized that to create an entrepreneurial city and to build an entrepreneurial city, you've got to plant that seed early. And you talked about the need to bring the arts and humanities back into public education, into the schools.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. That's an important thing. I mean, without exercising the creative muscles, if you have schools and a lot of inner cities and cities in general, just the first thing they cut is the art programs. And the math and the science and the school themselves they're like prisons. If you don't give kids a chance to think creatively, what are you going to do with the numbers? What will the science promote or create? Innovation is the most important thing for societies to survive and grow and flourish. So without giving kids the freedom to promote their artistic side, the societies die, and we are not doing it. We're not funding arts programs. Kids are just being made to learn math and science and these other, and their scholastic achievements, as you guys probably know, it grows. They grow when you give kids creative services as well, creative education as well. So you need to make sure that we educate it. We need to make sure our children have chance to practice and appreciate art.
Well said. All of you have so much experience working in North Texas for so long. So what resources or infrastructure do you think North Texas, and Dallas in particular, is lacking to kind of take us to that next level of entrepreneurship? Nina?
Is lacking. I've actually been a beneficiary of a lot of resources and a lot of people here in Dallas. I agree with Trey. Dallas has always been an entrepreneurial city. We just don't talk about it. And when I first started my business, actually I joined the Women's Business Council, I joined the Hispanic Chamber, I joined the NMSDC, the National Minority, the council in Dallas, and I met people like Don McNeely, who's sitting right in the front seat, who's been celebrating and writing about entrepreneurship for 23 years. So Don is an example of the kind of person who wants to tell your story. He's constantly talking about, and he owns 5 publications, and he does it on a state level, on a national level. And for an entrepreneur, one of their best friends is exposure. Because when you're working in your office, nobody knows who you are. And how in the world did a 5-foot Ecuadorian become one of the most influential Hispanics in America? Like, nobody knows my name, nobody knew me. And so I had to run my business, do well at my business. But what I found is that when I connected with organizations, and it turned into connecting with organizations that would help you grow your business, but also connecting with organizations that help the community. And so when I started my business, a lot of it, you're right, Gail, is your upbringing. And I grew up with an entrepreneurial father and a civic leader mother. And so my mother was always constantly talking about giving back to the community, giving back to the community. And when I started getting a little bit of business success, I would tell her about it, and she was so unimpressed. I couldn't impress her. I'm like, Mom, I run a $10 million company. She's like, ay, mija, qué lindo. Don't forget to take out the trash. And so it just wasn't impressive to her. And for years, I constantly would tell her, I've got this and I've achieved that. And she was never impressed. When I joined the Kohl's board of directors, I said, Mom, I'm on the board of directors of Kohl's department store, a publicly traded company. She said, do you get a discount? I mean, this woman is so unimpressed. Entrepreneur over the years, Ernst & Young. She's like, Ernst, who? Who is that? And so she taught me a very valuable lesson. And the valuable lesson now, 20 years later, has come to fruition. And she told me, Nina, I'm not impressed with your business success, and I'm not impressed with your money. If you want to impress me, then influence others. Touch people's lives you don't know.
You raise an interesting point. I mean, you're talking about humility there, and I'm wondering if each of you, if there are sort of three key points or rules you would have for like entrepreneurs, like starting out. I mean, humility seems to be like very key to your success, thanks to your mom. But Trey, are there some rules you would offer for young entrepreneurs or upstarts that they might want to follow?
Well, and Russell talked about this last night a little bit, but I always tell people the three things I like most about entrepreneurs is first, they're courageous. Right? It takes guts to go out and start a company or leave your job or do something like that. I mean, that is not for the faint of heart. Courage is the number one most important thing. Two is perseverance or resilience. The idea that it's going to get hard, right? It may be great in the beginning and you've got this awesome idea, but then you got to wait 5 years and you haven't made any money. All of a sudden you're thinking that might have been a bad investment. You have to know when to keep going. You have to fight through things. People don't recognize or understand how hard it is to start a business. But if you know that going in there, then you can do well. So courage, persistence, and then a little bit of perseverance, and then a little bit of crazy. Because you have to be crazy to have the courage and the perseverance to stick with an idea and go on and on and on. But I think what we have to recognize is that I, myself included, I look at this panel and I am amazed at the wonderful things that they are doing and the courage they had and the risks they've taken and the things that they've done. But the things that has built them into the successful entrepreneurs that they are, we all have in us. These traits, these skill sets, right? There's no difference, right? Courage is something we all have. Creativity is something that's exceptionally important. You ask IBM, IBM did a survey on the top 1,500 CEOs in the country, and they said, what's the number one thing you look for in a top executive? The answer was creativity. Right? This is things we teach kids in school, and we have to keep doing that. We have to look at this process as an entrepreneurial life cycle that starts at the age that somebody has. Mark Cuban says this all the time. 5-year-olds have ideas. There's nothing special about that. That doesn't differentiate us. What differentiates us is what we can do with that. And so if we teach somebody when they're 5 and when they're 10 and when they're 15 and 20 how to think, how to be creative, how to embrace those skill sets, then whether you are a media mogul or you are a barista at Starbucks, those skill sets, those entrepreneurial pieces can be used in your life to make you and everyone else around you better.
Gail?
Ditto.
That's fantastic.
I a couple of things. I think Trey is right on point. You definitely have to have courage. Definitely have to have a little bit of the crazy. I remember when I had started Warrior Construction, and I had so many people tell me, okay, but you don't have an engineering background, and you're not an architect, and you want to go into what? And I remember my mom telling me that specifically, and my mom, much like Nina's mom, she'd say things like, well, honey, you sure you want to be an entrepreneur? Because, I came from corporate America working for an oil company that was doing very well, and it was great getting that paycheck, and we had wonderful bonuses and go on vacation, and life was great. She said, you sure you want to leave the security of that? And so I think it does definitely take a little bit of crazy in order to go into the entrepreneurial world, but I also think it takes having a good support system. And so even though my parents thought I was a little crazy for doing it, they were always very supportive of everything that I was doing. And the team that I built, I always made sure that I had a team that was going to be supportive of all of the ideas that were being put on the table. And so I think as you're building your network of people within your organization and outside of your organization, it's important to have a wonderful network that you can rely on. We had a saying in our office is that we would take we would hire slow, but fire fast. Because typically, when you brought someone on, you take your time to find the right people within your organization, but then very quickly, once they get in, in your gut if they're going to be a fit for your organization and understand the vision and the goals that you have. And if they don't, then they can become a cancer, and so get rid of them very quickly. I think Trey is also right in regards to the creativity that you have to have, and I think going back to the question you had earlier about what some of the things that I think is lacking is that when kids when we're children, we have tons of ideas and we have tons of creativity. But I think as we go through the educational process and they get into high school, that creativity is stifled. And so kids don't have a chance to become innovators and to put great ideas on the table, particularly in the public school system, because we're so prone to just teach to a test. And we have some amazing, wonderful, incredible kids in this city. And I think one of the ladies talking last night, if anyone was here last night, just talking about some innovative ideas that we could do with our educational system to promote more creativity with our kids, because that is our next generation and our next future leaders. And so, we all have wonderful businesses and we're doing incredible things up here on the stage, and I'm sure many people are in the audience as well. But what are you doing to make sure that the next generation is going to still be able to be as creative or more creative and have those critical thinking skills to be able to do even bigger and better things tomorrow?
Salah, I want you to take the question in a slightly different direction here. So, those same qualities and attributes that an individual entrepreneur might need or individual business might need, how do you project that on a community or a city like ours? I mean, what are some of the key traits that a city or a community needs to become more entrepreneurial, both in spirit and in practice?
I love that question. I think it kind of ties together the two previous questions of because there's one more piece I think that's very important in entrepreneurship for the individual, and that's purpose. What is the purpose of the work that you're doing? So when Russell talked about the Rush card, he didn't start the business so that he could make money charging fees on a card. He started the business so that he could serve people who don't have access to a banking system. That is a human purpose. It helps other individuals achieve a greater life. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs kind of naturally and accidentally start by looking for an opportunity and saying, how can I make money at this? Or how can I build personal wealth through this? And that is important, but what you find at the end of the process, and I know this just from my own personal experience of having sold a company, at the end of it, you ask yourself, well, why did I do that? What was the real meaning? What happened to those 10 years? So I think it's very important to go in at the beginning and say, I'm doing this, yes, to use my skills to create wealth for myself and my family, but you have to have that additional piece that says, this is how I'm serving others, or this is how I'm expressing my highest purpose through the work that I'm doing every day. I think that also ties into the question you asked about what's missing in Dallas, because really, from a resource perspective, there is nothing missing in our city. We have all of the key components that you would need in terms of universities and funding sources and industry partners and the ecosystem that you need for being a successful entrepreneur. But what is missing in our city is that network of resource isn't available to everybody. There's a great divide in our city. So if you come from an area where you grew up with those connections, with those opportunities in those schools, then it's always extremely difficult and challenging to enter into an entrepreneurial career, but it's made possible because of the resources that you have available to you. I think one thing we could do as a city, and I think Trey's talked about this quite a bit also, is to bring the opportunities and the resources specifically to those people and those areas in the city that don't have that base to start from, because entrepreneurship is the very thing that will create the life and the opportunity that we want for everybody. That first step, that entry into the ecosystem is missing, and it's not going to happen by itself. We have to go from the folks who have the networks and resources, they have to consciously apply those, open those, foster those to solve some of the key problems in our own city.
Russell, correct me if I'm, well said. Correct me if I'm wrong. I think you do most of your business like in New York and LA, but as you know, you're sort of all over the place here. When you're in those cities in LA and New York, and we all know about Silicon Valley, of course, and the reputation it has. What do you see in those cities that allow you to kind of flourish there, or would Russell Simmons exist even if you were in Dallas, Texas, or someplace else?
Well, I don't know. I think I was very lucky that I found something I was passionate about. What you said about service, it really is a key component. Most people who just say, I want to make money, there are entrepreneurs who, they just come in, they buy companies, they turn them around, they fix them, they bankrupt them and build something else. They're money people and they're numbers people. And they're not necessarily innovators. So those are the people that generally come in to run companies, but there are people who just come in and say, here's what's wrong. You have these 12 people and and they fix the companies. Numbers sing to them. I can't count. So, but what you're saying about going into something that you're passionate about, it almost always stemmed from the rush card was I was trying to give it to companies or public Acorn, like I was meeting with them saying, why don't you just adopt this and make this part of your program to help people? I'm giving it to you. I have no interest in, and the only way to make it work was to make it a business. I didn't even see myself. I just said, well, this is a great idea, David. Maybe, and then once we realized, especially when we couldn't access, I said, let's make sure someone has this. It was to serve people, underserved communities, and it was to give them access to the American dream. And it really became the passion and the driving force behind the company. Why am I doing this? And I think that, it's always because people need it. And I just got to figure out how to do it, right? But people need it. And so that's really what it was. And I really liked hearing you say that because, entrepreneurs who go into it for money, then again, they're outside of their presence because only your heart will tell you to serve, and you're only going to serve if you connect to your heart. So that's where it comes from, and so that's absolutely true. You can't go into it for money. In fact, I'm always, from my own bad experience, I always go into businesses that don't show any potential to make anything for anybody. I've never gone, so they always seem like marginal in the beginning or whatever, and so they become business because I had belief that people needed it or wanted to see it, or wanted to, buy into it. So
how do you deal with failure? Because you've had many ventures, and I'm sure as an entrepreneur, I've heard the testimony already from Gail and both Nina saying that they both almost went bankrupt.
They turned them around.
Had to turn it around. What's been your, I know you don't like to dwell on the past and dwell on failure, you like to move on, but what's been your biggest failure and how did you overcome it?
Okay, you don't evolve spiritually except through struggle. You don't get to be a better person, you don't get to be a better entrepreneur. But I would say this about, your near bankrupt experiences. Had you made that choice, then you still would have turned it around, and because you kept on, you believed in it. So I just think things evolve more than they fail. They evolve, and so I don't really look at failure in the way that people do. They say, I remember that people always ask me, and I don't have a good recollection of failure. They say, well, what's the one defining moment that broke you at Def Jam? I said, well, I guess when the Beastie Boys left. like bullshit. They gave us that album that sold 15 million albums or whatever, and it was more than the rest of all the albums they sold. But I didn't think of it that way then. I think, I wasn't even hurt by it. I just had to make up a reason. What's your favorite record? The one on the radio. Because if it wasn't, because nowadays if it's not, you can press a button and play whatever you want. Like enjoy the moment, right? So I don't look back at failure, and I also don't believe that it is failure. And you can never fail until you quit. It's impossible to fail until you quit. So your mission evolves more than it fails. It evolves. And that's really that learning experience you gotta accept as a teacher. Your greatest teacher is struggle itself.
But if you're an entrepreneur, and I want to ask each of you.
He's a
this
very practical guy because he's going to say, well, what about how much money? Isn't that failure?
Well, there you go, yeah.
No, I know he's a real practical
so
type.
when do you know to pull the plug? Do you wait till your creditors, like you write a check and it comes back, insufficient funds? Or when do you know to pull the plug as an entrepreneur and say, this isn't working?
We ran through $30 million early on, it was called 360 Hip Hop. And I knew it was failure when everybody had to go home. Like after, it was before anybody really was successful in that world. And even, so when everybody had to go home, like we had to fire everybody and tell me, I don't even have, like, here's a small check, like go home. That's failure, isn't it? Yes, I guess. But then I went back and made Global Grind, so I did it again. So, but it was later when people accepted it, and then I met All Def Digital. So I guess my experience at 360 Hip Hop was part of my All Def Digital success, wasn't it? Or Global Grind success. So again, it's the way you look at it. But those people who went home, I failed. Well, I failed for them, right? So, but that's.
Trey, you may see. Given the work that you do with a lot of the companies, I'm sure this is an issue that a lot of the startups will struggle with. It's like, there's not a limited amount of funds here. So, what advice do you give these young entrepreneurs who are starting out about, how to recognize when it's time to cut your losses and move on, or that white space may not be space that needs to be filled?
Right. Well, so I agree with you. I think failure is really nothing other than an education. And I think if we look at it differently, then we're setting the wrong expectations. I think one of the things that I've learned today that's most exciting to me is that we need to reset our expectations for what entrepreneurship is. It's about creativity. It's about finding something that you're passionate about. It's about recognizing that you can control your contribution to the process, but you can't control the outcome all the time. And you've got to give back in that process. It's got to be built into part of what we're doing. And then if you do make it, you do sell a company, you do become successful, that really doesn't do anything for you. And the faith piece comes back in. And so I think as we look at what we project onto entrepreneurs and as success, we may need to redefine what that looks like. Because if we do that, then a failure is actually something that is really, really exciting and awesome for us.
What he calls failure.
What he calls failure,
Yeah,
right? And that's fine. He's not an entrepreneur, so we're going to put that on him. But I think I tell companies, look, you're entering a opportunity that we know 8 to 9 out of 10 people fail. So if you succeed, you're the exception. So what do you have to lose? It's not going to work, so go try it.
I love it.
But then, on top of that, bring in the right resources, right? I tell people the one thing an entrepreneur needs is often the one thing that they don't have, and that is experience. And you can get experience in one of two ways. You can either earn it, which takes time, money, and wounds, and most of us don't have enough money to make all the mistakes we're going to make and still be able to launch our company. Or two, you can learn it from people who have been there before. And so surrounding yourselves with good people, people that are better than you, listening to people that have been there before, a lot of the reasons people that are successful is because they made the mistake once and they didn't make it again. And so not only do we have to fail fast, we have to learn fast, and we have to humble ourselves, because oftentimes as entrepreneurs or visionaries, we think we know something that nobody else knows. And that's wrong. And so I think what I tell them is surround yourselves with the right people. Put the right people on your team. Recognize and look at whether or not this is going to work. Go out and talk to actual customers. And then if it doesn't work, move on to something else.
Salah, you have, all of you guys have incredibly inspiring stories, and I'm going to get yours in a minute about quitting college in the 20s and launching your record label or in the 20s. But let me start with Salah, because your background, I mean, coming from, you were a heck of a musician, and you kind of moved over into IT services, I believe, and now doing this other incredible work. I think that's worth sharing very briefly that, when did you recognize you were a musician and that you sort of lost that passion for it? It ties in what you were talking about earlier about finding that purpose and that passion. You went from being a musician to drifting into IT work into this entrepreneur now. How did that happen?
That's a complicated
in 30
story.
seconds or less.
I think most people go through this in their lives. They go through phases where, especially if you are entrepreneurial, you're very, very focused on creating that vision, bringing that vision to life that you have for yourself. And if it's not evolving and changing, there's probably something wrong. So I think most of us will spend a period of time, get deep into something, and then we're ready for the next thing. One thing I have learned is, you mentioned, I used to be a classical pianist, so I, not the kind of music that most people are listening to today, but it's a world in which everything that you experience is part of your music. There is no moment during the day when you're not being a musician. There's no experience no interaction that you have with someone, no story that you read, no play that you see, and no experience that a friend has that doesn't somehow contribute to your sense of being a musician and to your expression. That's not always the case with entrepreneurship if you're focused on just a product or just a monetary outcome or just an event like selling a company. But if your entrepreneurship is really about a vision, then it takes on that same quality as when you're a musician, because every single interaction that you have then becomes a reflection on the vision that you're trying to achieve. So entrepreneurs work all the time anyway, but there's something special about living a life where play, work, relationships, artistic experiences, there's no difference between them. They're all kind of integrated in your life. And I think it's only entrepreneurs and artists that really get to have that opportunity, because everybody else is kind of going to their job and splitting their day up.
Russell, well said. The way you began your entrepreneurial adventure, you were in your 20s, and did you see yourself as or maybe younger, did you see yourself as an entrepreneur then, or just a guy that was hoping to, make some headway in the music business? How did you see yourself in the 20s, early on, starting out?
Well, I found something I loved. I had another experience before that. It was kind of entrepreneurial because we didn't really have as a culture in the urban community back then. It's like if you could go to school, like that'd be all. It'd be the greatest thing in the world, right? And that was it. So, but there were people in the corners who were more entrepreneurial, and I was one of them. So, you buy something cheap and you sell it for more expensive than you paid for it because you bag it up, right? And so that experience was entrepreneurial, and that's the only kind of entrepreneurs we saw. And that really, if you look at the experience, that was the culture, just to get a little education and go and work for whoever, right? And so that was the first thing. And then so I saw something I loved that was a little safer. And it was the same thing. It's like, okay, I'm going to rent this venue, and it's going to cost this much, and I'm going to get these artists, and they hadn't made any records yet. But they were really popular in Harlem and the Bronx, and they were just building out a little buzz. And so I started promoting their shows. And then by 1979, before most of you were born, I put out Christmas rapping. I remember I got on a plane and shit. I'd never been on a plane. I went to Amsterdam. I said, "What do you want, Mr. Simmons?" That was a real endorsement of my work, right? They called me Mr. Simmons. And I was in Amsterdam, so the president of the company asked me, I said, "I want some cocaine and a girl," and he got me both. So I thought I was endorsed fully then. After that, I'm sober now for 30 years. Anyway, But it was an experience that kind of inspired me just a little bit of, and I think I beg all of you to accept little experiences. You don't have to have the experience of getting on a plane and the president of a company buy you drugs and get you a girl. You don't need that. You just need little experiences that show you that, and just to be able to wake up in the morning should be the first blessing, and then every second, you count your blessings, and even struggle accept it as your teacher. And so this attitude that he talked about, it's all in the melody, It's life, It's like you're alive. Most people living on $1 a day. You got a television somewhere, or your friend got one. I mean, you got everything. There's nothing they can give you. The world cannot give you a payment for your work that's meaningful. And it's all inside. So operate from abundance and be happy in your work and be focused in your work. And that's the payment. The work itself is the prayer. And I say that to you because there's no failure in success the way you're referring to it, because I don't care what you get. The next thing is get more. Oh yeah, now that we did this, So the celebration of what you got is kind of a false one, and the celebration of what you don't have is certainly a false one as well. Just go about your work, enjoy your life, and then you can have a little more confidence and faith in your work, because there is no fear of failure, which is the greatest problem with people becoming entrepreneurs is that they're worried about failure. But there's no failure, because your mama got a couch.
Mama's got a couch. I like that. Just remember that. That's we're at that wonderful moment in the program where we get to engage you, the audience. And so please come up to the microphones if you have a question. And before I take the first question, I think I've got the gentleman to the left here, but I want to give Nina a chance real quickly. I don't think I asked you what we were talking about the essential qualities for being an entrepreneur, and I didn't get a chance to come back to you about what are the 2 or 3 things you think are essential for being a successful entrepreneur while we get the people lined up.
I agree with everything that's been said, and I'm standing in the way of questions. And so one of the things that I think is essential, and as the rest of the panel was speaking, I was thinking something we didn't really talk about is people. And the essential thing I'm going to talk about is compassion. I don't run companies, people do. And so what I have learned in my short 20 years in my entrepreneurial experience is that people don't work for you, they work with you. Thank you. And I've made that real clear in our businesses. You don't work for me, you work with me. And I think it's really important when you're creating an entrepreneurial environment. By the way, you don't have to be the CEO, the chairman, the founder to be an entrepreneur. There are lots of entrepreneurs in our business. It's a mindset. It's a mindset. What I do is I find the right people with the right integrity, with the right qualities, with the right fire in their belly, and I'll teach them our business. It is not difficult. Trust me, if I could do it, anybody could do it. And so I always look for the caliber of people. Jim Collins famously said it's about getting the right people on the bus, but what I'm learning now is it's also about getting them in the right seats. And creating an entrepreneurial environment means having compassion sometimes and allowing people to fail. And someone challenged me on that notion one day and said, Nina, what do you mean? So people can make mistakes and they still have a job? No, that's not what I'm saying. If you believe in people, I have lost count of the time people have disappointed me. I have lost count of the times where people maybe didn't do what I expected or didn't live up to my expectation. And so in your disappointment, you have to think about, where is this really coming from? Do you believe in that person? And time again, those people that I've decided, you know what? I believe in them. This is just a mistake. This is part of their journey. Those are the same people that have taken that opportunity and really been grateful and been with me for the past 16, 15, 17, and 18, 19 years at my side, because they know that I believe in them. And even though they made a mistake or two along the way, they're still here. And the last thing I want to say, because it's important to say so, is be careful what you think success is. Most people attribute success to money. I did. When I was 25 years old, I thought being successful was money. And what I've learned that it's just so not. I don't look like this every day, and neither do a lot of really successful people. You look at them at their best. You see them with their best clothes, their best hair, their best everything. But what you don't realize is being an entrepreneur is not about that. It's like being a duck. A duck looks beautiful, coming through the water. They look beautiful and serene. But underneath it all, they're working their ass off. And that's really what entrepreneurial is. It is, the hustle is not over. We are the fastest growing women-owned business in America, and the hustle is so not over. So I wanted to let you know that.
That's
Fantastic.
That's the main point. That's it.
Let's start on the, we'll go from the left and to the right. So I'll ask you, just make your question very succinct, and if you want to direct the question to a particular panelist.
The smallest woman in your industry, or the smallest entrepreneur, has the same kind of struggle, desire, lack of validation to some degree, right? Because the hustle's not over, right? So it's all the same, isn't it? Right? And you learn that as you, especially to be a success story that you are, you learned a lot. And that's what everybody who's just beginning is faced with, the same thing she's faced with tomorrow morning. Okay.
Let's start with the gentleman
Monday.
on the left in the hat. Sorry, Russell. Let's start with that.
I wrote it down so it's distinct. First, shout out, this question is for Mr. Simmons. Shout out to Michael Skonik, your advisor, because the world would have never heard the name Trayvon Martin without his leadership.
That's right.
I've recently created a nonprofit that curates rejuvenating experiences for students in order to get messages of hope to our impoverished communities. We've done events for 1,000+ students with inspiring leaders like Kendrick Lamar, Erykah Badu, and Chance the Rapper. The white space that I'm filling is bringing cultural relevancy to the education world. The problem I'm finding is that I can't sustain those messages of hope if I don't teach our students about the white supremacy and the history and its lasting effects. Unfortunately, the problem that I'm finding is that the funding community and the businesses in the city are unwilling to acknowledge the history and the lasting effects of white supremacy. Instead, they tell the false narrative that poverty is a root cause, not the centuries of systematic oppression. What advice would you give to me as I raise capital for this organization, as well as meet with Keith at Revolt and EP at Def Jam in the next week?
Well, and what about the next what?
I'm meeting with Keith over at Revolt, and Eric Parler at Def Jam's a good friend, and I've been working with him.
Okay. Advice is, look, the people have been not acknowledging struggle, or how struggle came about, or, for instance, I'm sure you addressed the prison industrial complex and how it's taken church communities all over the country and turned them into their culture. Church culture became jail culture. 9 out of 10 people in New York State prison said 9.5 out of 10 people in New York State jail when we changed the Rockefeller drug law were people of color. Everybody uses and sells drugs at the same rate. But what they were educating drug abused people in criminal behavior and dumping them back in the hood. And it became the culture that makes these music that people are shocked to hear. It became the struggle that you are referring to. Just as Jim Crow came prison industrial complex came. So you see struggle always exists. And lack of, they're poisoning now. They talk about Flint, Michigan. If you know the Navajo, their water is fucking horrible. Right, you think Flint shit is bad. And I went and visited the people of Flint, and I couldn't believe, oh my God. I couldn't believe what was going on. There was a woman there, and I went to people's houses, and they're like, her kid's crying, he's got a seizure. This kid hasn't spoken, because he's been drinking poison water for two years. And he's 3. This nigga, he's never gonna speak. And this kid is, I was like, oh shit, house to house. And they're just still there, they're not evacuated, nothing. Poverty will always exist. The lack of compassion, you always try to influence people to be more compassionate and understanding to suffering. You have to let go of the struggle yourself. As many people who are in what you see as a contaminated or difficult environment can let go of it and still be happy. You have to go to work every day with a smile, with your mission, and find ways to frame your messaging so that people will hear your message and support your initiative. That's all you can do. And I say this because it's the same I say about entrepreneurship and anything else. You got to go to work and you got to smile and breathe through that struggle that you have in front of you, and the urgency of it. Don't make it the edge of it when you promote it.
You have a lot more power and money than I do. Do you think that companies and funding communities
Hey, I'm sorry,
will actually
a
change
long
their
question.
message?
Yeah.
Because they benefit. These
you
big
have
companies
to, you
in
have
this
to find a
city
way to
benefit
frame your
from-
message, find the right way of helping those people in struggle. I know they want to cut you off because you talk about real struggle in the community, but it's time. They want to move on, but you got to smile and breathe. Do the best. Mother Teresa's sitting there. Everybody is suffering. She's smiling and holding a baby, right? Because she's doing the best she can in a difficult situation. She can't come there and struggle. She has to come there and bring hope. So you go do it, bring hope.
Great question. Just a quick reminder, we got less than 10 minutes, so I don't want to be rude, so just be very brief, succinct with the questions, and we'll try to get as many in as we can. Yes, sir.
Okay, mine is basically, for each one of you, how do you manage trust in your business life?
How do you manage to maintain trust in your business life? Okay. Want to start, Russell?
I mostly have faith in people, and they have to really prove me wrong.
No, I just talked about that today. I have lost count. I mentioned it today. It happened just a couple days ago when someone disappoints you. And you have to decide whether you're going to trust that person. And if you are, then you do. And if you aren't, then you need to go the direction. But you need to figure out, does this person have the integrity and the values that I have? Because integrity and value, people make mistakes all the time. People will screw up all the time. But what I always ask myself is, what was their intention? Intention matters.
First of all, it may be foolish, but it's my own policy. I trust everybody that comes to work with me. I give them 100% of the benefit of the doubt, and then if that turns out not to be the case, you deal with that. But the vast majority of people are people that you're going to want to work with and going to want to have around you. If you put this layer of distrust on top of everybody so that you can protect yourself from 1 out of 100, then everybody suffers. Also, I think when you are done an injustice in business, the first place to look is to see if you've done that injustice to another person or in another environment, because I've found that it comes back around. So before you start, yes, people will do wrong from time to time, but before you take the action or before you assign the blame, I think it's important to look inside at the lesson.
I think we are all a product of our combined life experiences. And so when you have people that work with you, then you, if they hurt you, you have to stop and take pause and ask yourself, okay, is this, where is this coming from, and was this intended intentionally or personally? And I think you would find that, 9 times out of 10, if not 10 times out of 10, that people don't intend to do harm. We make mistakes because none of us are perfect. And so when you go into it with that mindset and make sure that you have people around you, you start out with a level of trust until they show you that they can't trust you. And even when that happens, then you have to ask yourself, okay, their life experiences are completely different from your life experiences, and so whatever they did to hurt you more than likely was not intentional. And so if you can get to the core of that and have a conversation, then most times I think you can clear the air.
So 2 things: show me, don't tell me. And second of all, we have to recognize the importance of reputation in the history of our careers. If you do not operate with integrity with somebody at 25, they're not going to work with you at 45. But if you do operate with integrity when you're 25 and you call that person 20 years later, they're going to work with you as well. There is a difference between making a mistake and creating a historical pattern of distrust. So I think we need to recognize that importance moving forward.
Good. We're down to 3 minutes, so we got to direct our questions to a particular panelist at this moment. Yes, ma'am.
So to the ladies, Nina and Gail, you guys talked about the noise and other people, but what do you do when the noise is yourself?
Good question. Oftentimes, the noise can be yourself. I think more times than often is yourself versus other people. Again, I think, when I said earlier we're a product of our life experiences, sometimes the noise is coming from things that may have happened to you or things that were said to you from early childhood. And so you have to stop and look at yourself and find out, why are you giving yourself this negative self-talk? And every morning you have to sometimes be your own best cheerleader and find that confidence within yourself, because you were born to do wonderful and great and amazing things. You just have to remind yourself. Sometimes we just have to remind ourselves about that every day, and just go out there and be fearless even when we don't want to. We were backstage before we even came out here, and some of us were saying, "Are you nervous?" We're all very successful, entrepreneurs.
That was me, by the way.
And we were like, yeah, because, we didn't have like a set,
I thought she owned one taco stand the way she was so nervous. I like I didn't know what she did. I'm hearing what she...
So I don't think
was
that...
failing, too. I didn't know.
Yeah. So in short, I think no matter how successful, you become, you have to be careful about giving yourself that negative self-talk and just go out and be fearless every day.
Let's move on to the next
Meditate.
question. Yes, sir.
Thank you. Great panel. I really enjoyed this. So I moved here to Dallas 2.5 years ago. I run a nonprofit here, the All Stars Project of Dallas. I'm the city leader. And so my youth programs introduce young people from some of the poorest communities here in Dallas to the business world, introduce them to business leaders like Hunter Hunt, who's the chair of our board. And the city constantly tells them, and y'all mentioned some of this, that these kids cannot succeed. The schools are not working very well. We're 70% Hispanic and the third leading city in child poverty. So what can we say to our young people that I have here? I have 7 of them here.
Everybody is struggling except you. You guys your friends got TV, people living on $1 a day or less.
Yep.
Immigrants get off the plane and they're like, oh shit, if they get off a plane or they come across, they say, wow, and they go to work, they put their head down, and the next generation, they're successful. You can't let the cultural environment or the jail culture I referred to make your life. And that's what I tell them. I don't say that to make everybody who's part of the system that is infrastructure that hurts you so badly comfortable, but I say that for you as an individual, say, look, you got everything. Get out there and go do that shit. You can do it. You can do it. You go make friends in all places. Don't hang out with who you hang with. Don't fuck with the people going to jail. Stay away from them. Find out, who you see is successful, going where you want to go, and hang out with them. They may be a different color. They may be living in a different part of the city. Go out there. You got everything in front of you.
Well, unfortunately, we're out of time. We're at a very tight schedule. I do apologize for not getting more of you guys involved.
I feel bad that we're finishing.
This concludes our session. Check your program for other sessions and other festival activities throughout the day. You can sign up for the action phase through Pulse M or by using the tear sheets on the registration tables in festival headquarters. Thank you for being with us, and don't miss the festival wrap-up session here in the music hall at 5:30 when the big ideas from all festival teams and plans for future action will be announced. Let's give our panel a big hand. Russell Simmons, Nina Vaca, Salah, Boukadoum, Gail Warrior, and Trey. Thank you. Great.